The Supreme Court is back in session, but the justices have not yet given an indication as to whether or not they will take up a case concerning the fatal abortion pill, Mifepristone. Mifepristone is the first drug used in a chemical abortion, which starves babies in the womb of the nutrients they need to survive. This spring, a Trump-appointed judge sounded the alarm on these drugs, and in August, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Mifepristone should not be allowed to be sent through the mail. In response, President Biden's Justice Department asked the U.S. Supreme Court to protect widespread access to Mifepristone. Danco Laboratories, whose factories make abortion pills, is backing the Biden administration. And this month, more than 600 Democrat legislators also hopped on board in support of the dangerous abortion drug, filing an amicus brief to the Supreme Court. And helping us unpack this legal battle over Mifepristone is attorney Cristina Squiers. She serves as counsel at Cher Jaffe. Cristina, thank you for being here. What happens next? When could we get an indication about whether or not the Supreme Court will take up this case? And do you personally think that it's likely?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And in terms of what happens next, we have to wait for the briefing to finish for the process of seeking what's called certiorari at the Supreme Court, seeking review. So while Danco and the FDA have filed their briefs asking the court to take up the case, we are now waiting for the brief from the plaintiffs' groups opposing that request. And then once that briefing is done, the court will conference on the case and decide whether they want to take it. It only takes 4 justices to agree to take a case at the Supreme Court. And while there are probably 4 who might agree with the ruling, this would be the court's first major case on abortion since Dobbs. And I'm not sure the court yet has an appetite to dive back into the abortion issue. So Other than that, there are also major issues in the case that might prevent review, such as deference to administrative agencies. This involves looking at what the FDA has done, which poses an additional hurdle to getting the case taken up, because that's a very controversial issue, looking at administrative agencies.
I see. Thank you for pointing that out. And hundreds of pro-abortion lawmakers representing 49 states filed an amicus brief asking for the Supreme Court to protect abortion pills. I'm wondering if you could just break this down for us. What is an amicus brief? How does it impact the Supreme Court's review of a specific case?
So an amicus brief is what's called a friend of the court brief. So it's a third party who has an interest in the case but is not either the plaintiff or defendant. And so at this stage, when they're trying to seek Supreme Court review, you will only see amicus briefs on behalf of the party seeking review. So here, that's the FDA and the abortion pill manufacturer, Danco. You will not see any of the briefs that were filed at the lower courts on behalf of the plaintiffs supporting the Fifth Circuit's decision. And that's because they don't want to indicate that the Supreme Court should take this case, because the Fifth Circuit ruled the way that they would want to. So you'll only see briefs at this stage that are supporting the FDA and Danco. And I think the court does take seriously a lot of the arguments that are raised by these third parties, depending on how reputable they are and if they are bringing a perspective that's different than what the parties are saying.
Very interesting. So we're hearing a lot from the pro-abortion side now, because the courts so far have ruled in favor of restricting Mifepristone. I'm curious, shifting gears a little bit, numerous pro-abortion states have enacted, quote, shield laws that would protect abortionists who send abortion pills to women in pro-life states, where they've ruled that that's not legal. What would happen in those states if the Supreme Court does end up taking this up down the road and they were to rule in favor of pro-life states?
So if the Supreme Court were to rule in favor of the pro-life states, then the use of Mifepristone would be severely restricted. So all of the regulations that the FDA had put in place previously that they've gotten rid of would be back in place. So Mifepristone would still be available. You could not get it via telemedicine, could not get it in the mail, things like that. So it would really take away that concern of mailing them across state lines, because that option would no longer be available if the Supreme Court agreed with the Fifth Circuit.
I see. Cristina, are there any other important details that we haven't mentioned that are important about this case for pro-life Americans to know about?
Yeah, I think one really important aspect, if you take a look at the amicus briefs that have been filed, and even the FDA's and Danco's, is that there's a big underlying argument here about what's more important, abortion safety or abortion access. And a lot of the parties that have filed at this stage are saying that access is more important than safety, which I think is something that everyone should be thinking about. And reading a lot of the briefs, on the other side at the lower courts to really engage with the safety arguments and see if that issue is actually more important than access, which I would argue definitely is.
Right, right. Well, we know in the pro-life movement that there's no such thing as a safe abortion, so it's important to be paying attention to that. Cristina Squiers, counsel at Cher Jaffe, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue to track this case and appreciate your expertise.
My pleasure. Thank you.